first time, we're learning what investigators say happened in the moments before a Del Rio mother of 5 was stabbed to death.
32-year-old Carolyn Raquel Peña was laid to rest today as 3 young women now face murder charges in her death. Court documents are also giving us our first detailed look at what police describe as a 3-on-1.
She was still breathing when they smiled for the camera, still fighting for every last breath in a hospital bed miles away. Tubes keeping her body from giving up what her attackers had already decided was over. And the women who put her there? They weren't crying. They weren't silent. They were laughing, joking. One of them stuck out her tongue like she was leaving a birthday party, not a crime scene. Like the blood on that street belonged to someone who didn't matter. A mother of 5 was butchered in the middle of the day on a residential street, in front of cameras, in front of the world. And nobody stopped it. What you're about to hear is not a cold case buried in decades of dust. This happened recently in a quiet Texas border town where everybody knows everybody, where children play outside and neighbors wave from their porches. A place where something like this was never supposed to happen. And yet, on an ordinary Thursday afternoon, a woman who was somebody's everything bled out on a sidewalk while her killers walked away. We need to warn you before we go any further. This case is deeply disturbing. The details are graphic. The behavior of the accused is chilling, and the impact on the family left behind is devastating. If violent crime content is something you need to step away from, we understand. But if you are staying, we ask that you stay with purpose. Because the woman at the center of this story deserves witnesses, not just viewers. If you are new to Unsolved Files, welcome, though we wish it were under different circumstances. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss a case, and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. We have followers from every corner of the globe, and every single one of you helps keep these stories alive, and these victims from being forgotten. Now, let's talk about what really happened on that street. Let's talk about the phone call that was never answered. And let's talk about 5 children who went to bed that night without their mother, and why the women accused of making that happen didn't seem to lose a single minute of sleep over it. This is the case of Caroline Peña. And before this video is over, you will never forget her name. Thursday, June 25th, 2025 started like any other day in Del Rio. It was the kind of morning that does not announce itself. No warning. No sign that by nightfall, a community of 35,000 people will be shaken in a way that small border cities rarely recover from quickly. Caro was up. She was moving. She had 5 kids and a life that kept her busy from the moment her eyes opened. At some point that morning, she picked up her phone and called Christina Salinas. The call rang out. Salinas did not answer. It was a kind of missed call nobody thinks twice about, the kind you plan to return in an hour when things slow down. But things did not slow down. And that hour never came the way Salinas expected it to. What happened next unfolded fast. Within a short window after that unanswered call, Caro got into her black pickup truck and drove to a residential address on the 800 block of East 10th Street. She had a reason to be there. Del Rio Police Chief Frank Ramirez would later confirm that the women involved all knew each other, and that Caro's presence at that location that afternoon was not random. What that reason was, investigators have not yet made public. But she drove there. She parked. She got out. Christina Salinas had no idea any of this was happening. She went about her afternoon unaware, until a photo began circulating on a community Facebook page. She saw it and recognized a woman in it immediately. It was Caro. Salinas rushed to Val Verde Regional Medical Center. She made it in time. She saw her friend before Caro was airlifted to a trauma facility in San Antonio. Later, speaking to KNS5, Salinas said that even in that condition, Caro was still standing her ground. But before Salinas ever reached that hospital, something had already been captured on a doorbell camera at East 10th Street. Every second of it. And it would become the most critical piece of evidence in this entire case. The doorbell camera at the East 10th Street residence recorded everything. Investigators would later describe the footage as capturing the entirety of the incident, from the moment Caro arrived to the moment the 3 suspects fled. In a case that could have come down to conflicting witness accounts and incomplete evidence, that camera changed everything. It gave detectives a frame-by-frame account of what happened on that street on the afternoon of June 25th. Here is what the probable cause affidavit says that camera recorded. Caro arrived first. She pulled up to the address in her black pickup truck and parked near the home. The property belongs to Kendra Renee Foz, 21 years old, a Del Rio resident who knew Caro and who was present at the scene when the confrontation began. According to the affidavit, Foz later told officers that Caro had driven to her home that afternoon looking to start a fight. That account has not been independently verified by police, and it is worth being precise about who is making that claim. Kendra Foz is not a neutral witness. She is one of 3 women charged with murder in connection with what happened next. Her version of events is on record. It is not established fact. What the camera recorded next is documented in the affidavit and is not disputed by investigators. Shortly after Caro parked, a black Chrysler pulled up to the address. 2 women stepped out. Kitty Mia Diaz, 21, and her younger sister Amaya Cookie Diaz, 19. They moved toward Caro. According to the affidavit, as Cookie exited the vehicle, she was holding an object in her right hand that investigators believed to be a knife. She approached Caro directly. The 2 women came into contact, and Cookie struck Caro in the back. The footage is clear enough that investigators noted blood becoming visible on the back of Caro's shirt at the point of impact. The attack did not stop there. Kitty Mia Diaz then physically joined the assault. Kendra Foz also participated. 3 women, 1 victim. In the middle of the afternoon, on a residential street with a camera running the entire time. According to friend Christina Salinas, who spoke to KNS5 after visiting Caro at the hospital, the injuries Caro sustained included wounds to her back that punctured her lungs and a wound to her stomach. Salinas was not present at the scene. Her account of the injuries reflects what she was told and what she witnessed at the hospital, and it aligns with the documented severity of Caro's condition in the hours that followed. At some point, the altercation ended. The affidavit states the attack was broken up. All 3 suspects left the scene. Caro was left behind. What happened in the minutes immediately after is not fully detailed in publicly available documents. What is confirmed is that Caro was transported to Val Verde Regional Medical Center, the regional hospital serving Del Rio and the surrounding Val Verde County area. Her injuries were serious enough that the medical team there determined she required a higher level of trauma care than the facility could provide. She was airlifted to a specialized trauma center in San Antonio, roughly 150 miles east, where surgical teams were waiting. As of that point in the afternoon, no arrests had been made. The suspects were gone. The street was quiet again, and a 32-year-old mother of 5 was in the air, fighting to survive what had happened to her in broad daylight in front of a camera that had recorded every second of it. Del Rio Police Chief Frank Ramirez has since confirmed publicly that all 4 women involved knew each other, and that Caro's presence at East 10th Street that afternoon was not accidental. The specific nature of their relationship, the history between them, and whatever sparked the confrontation that day have not been officially disclosed. The investigation into the motive remains active. Police have stated clearly that no official motive has been released, and that the full circumstances surrounding the encounter are still being determined. What investigators did have, within minutes of beginning their work, was the footage, clear, time-stamped, showing faces, clothing, a vehicle, and a sequence of events that left very little room for interpretation. The camera had done what witnesses sometimes cannot. It stayed still. It kept running. It did not look away. And what detectives did with that footage in the 2 hours that followed is where this case moves next. At approximately 2:10 in the afternoon, officers with the Del Rio Police Department were dispatched to Val Verde Regional Medical Center. The call that came in was straightforward. A woman had arrived at the hospital with multiple stab wounds. What was not yet known was where it happened, who did it, or whether the people responsible were still anywhere near the scene. Detectives moved immediately. The first task was locating the origin of the attack. Through initial witness interviews and a rapid review of available surveillance footage, investigators pinpointed the incident to the 800 block of East 10th Street within a short window of arriving on the case. That address gave them a scene to process and a camera system that had already done a significant portion of their work for them. The doorbell footage was pulled. It was reviewed. And according to probable cause affidavit, It captured the confrontation in its entirety, including the faces of the people involved, the vehicle they arrived in, and the clothing each person was wearing at the time of the attack. From that footage, detectives had names. They had descriptions. They had a black Chrysler on camera. Physical evidence at the scene was also collected and processed. The investigation moved on multiple tracks simultaneously, which is standard procedure in cases where suspects are mobile and time is a factor. Every minute that passed was a minute the people on that footage could be putting distance between themselves and Del Rio. They were not putting distance between themselves and Del Rio. Investigators traced the Diaz sisters to a separate residence on the other side of the city. It was a different address from East 10th Street, across town, and when officers arrived, they found something that removed any remaining uncertainty about whether they had the right location. The black Chrysler, the same vehicle documented on the doorbell camera arriving at Faz's home earlier that afternoon, was parked in the driveway. Kitty Mia Diaz and Amaya Cookie Diaz were taken into custody at that address at approximately 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Both were arrested without incident. Kyandra Renee Faz was located separately and arrested a short time later. All three were transported to the Del Rio Police Department for booking. From there, they were transferred to the Geo Correctional Facility in Del Rio, where they have remained since. From the moment officers were dispatched to that hospital to the moment the third suspect was in custody, fewer than 2 hours had passed. That timeline is worth sitting with for a moment. 2 hours. In many serious criminal cases, arrests take days, weeks, or longer. Witnesses go quiet. Evidence degrades. Suspects relocate. None of that happened here. The surveillance footage was clear. The vehicle was identifiable. The suspects had not left the city. And the physical evidence gave investigators exactly what they needed to move quickly and decisively. Del Rio Police Chief Frank Ramirez spoke publicly about the case in an interview published on June 29, 2025. He confirmed that the investigation had established that all 4 women involved knew one another and that the attack was not, in his assessment, a random event. He was careful to note that the investigation remained active and that conclusions were subject to change as detectives continued gathering evidence. But the direction was clear. This was not a case of mistaken identity or a stranger encounter gone wrong. These women had a history. What that history was, and what specifically brought them to East 10th Street on that Thursday afternoon, remained the central question investigators were still working to answer. What Ramirez did not yet address publicly was what officers found when they walked into that second residence to make the arrests. Because what was waiting for them inside, that home told a story of its own. And it was not the story the sisters may have hoped it would tell. When officers stepped inside that second residence, the arrest had already been made. Kitty and Cookie were in custody. But investigators were not done with that home. A search of the property was conducted, and what it turned out to contain added an entirely new dimension to the case. Start with what officers observed the moment they made contact with the sisters. The doorbell camera footage from East 10th Street was precise about what each woman was wearing during the attack. Kitty Mia Diaz had been recorded in a pink tank top and blue jeans. Amaya Cookie Diaz had been recorded in a red tank top and blue jeans. That clothing was documented. It was on camera. It was evidence. Neither sister was wearing those clothes when police arrived. Both women had changed. Both had showered. When officers encountered them, their hair was still wet. The time between the attack on East 10th Street and the moment police knocked on that door was roughly 2 hours. In those 2 hours, with Caroline Peña fighting for her life in a San Antonio trauma facility, the sisters had found time to wash off and change their appearance entirely. That alone would have been significant. What investigators found next made it a separate criminal matter. During the search of the home, police located clothing consistent with what Kitty Mia Diaz had been wearing in the surveillance footage. The pink tank top, the blue jeans. They were not discarded. They were not hidden in a trash bag or thrown in a corner. They had been placed inside a washing machine. The machine tells its own story. Putting clothing into a washing machine is not an impulsive act. It requires a decision. It requires locating the garment, carrying it to a specific room, place it inside, and either starting the cycle or preparing to. That sequence takes deliberate thought. It is not something that happens by accident in the aftermath of a traumatic afternoon. It is something that happens when a person is thinking clearly enough to understand that what is on that clothing could be used against them. As a result of that discovery, Kitty Mia Diaz was charged with an additional count of tampering with physical evidence. That charge is specific to Kitty. Amaya Cookie Diaz and Kayanda Renee Foz do not face that additional count. Cookie had also changed and showered, but the clothing connected directly to the tampering charge was recovered in relation to Kitty specifically. Also present in that home when officers arrived was Kitty's 4-year-old son. That is a fact in the record. It is noted here because it is part of what the documents state. Nothing more needs to be said about it than that. If you are watching this and you are not yet subscribed to Unsolved Files, now is a good time. This case is still developing. The charges against these 3 women may not be finished. As new information surfaces, new filings are made, and this investigation moves toward a grand jury. We will cover every update the moment it becomes public. Hit subscribe so you are already here when it does. What happened next is what most of the internet has already seen. But there is more to that footage than the smile. Body camera footage from the arrest was obtained by the New York Post, and it did not take long for it to spread across every platform that covers true crime, local news, and everything in between. By the time most people outside of Del Rio heard the name Caroline Peña, they had already seen the video first. Here's what the footage shows, documented and on record. As Amaya Cookie Diaz was being escorted to her patrol car, she was laughing. She joked at the camera operator filming the scene and told him to stop recording, not with distress in her voice, not with the kind of nervous deflection people sometimes show when they are frightened and overwhelmed. She was relaxed, loose, the tone of someone leaving somewhere they had been, not someone being taken into custody for murder. Kitty Mia Diaz was captured separately in the footage. She was grinning. At one point, she stuck her tongue out at the camera. Michael Elizondo, a journalist who responded to the scene and witnessed the arrest firsthand, described what he saw to the New York Post. He said the first sister was not particularly notable as she was placed in the vehicle, but the second one stopped him. He said she was in a happy mood, smiling and goofing off, and that her behavior gave no indication that anything serious had just taken place. That account is not editorial. It is an eyewitness description from a working journalist who was standing there. Del Rio Police Chief Frank Ramirez addressed the footage directly in his interview published by TMZ on June 29, 2025. He said it did not look good. He said he would have expected more remorse in a situation like that. And then he used a specific word to describe what he saw. He called it callous. That word came from the chief of the department that made the arrests, not from social media, not from a comment section. Now here's the detail that reframes everything about that footage. When those cameras captured Cookie laughing and Kitty grinning on their way to patrol cars, Caroline Peña was not dead. She was in a trauma facility in San Antonio, in surgery, with medical teams working to keep her alive. She had been airlifted there hours earlier. She was still fighting. Caroline Peña was not pronounced dead until approximately 9 o'clock that evening. The arrest footage was recorded hours before that. The smiling, the tongue, the joke to the camera operator, all of it happened while Caro was still alive. That is not an interpretation. It is the timeline. The video went viral. Public reaction was immediate and sharp. Del Rio is a small city. People there knew Caro. They knew her children. They knew her twin sister. And they watched that footage the same way the rest of the country did, with the same question that still has not been fully answered. Why? As of the time this video was recorded, all 3 women remain at the Geo Correctional Facility in Del Rio. Each is being held on a bond of $5 million. Court records list all 3 as unemployed. None of them have posted bond. None of them have walked out. The charges against them are as follows. Kayanda Renee Foz faces 1 count of murder. Amaya Cookie Diaz faces 1 count of murder. Kitty Mia Diaz faces 1 count of murder plus the additional count of tampering with physical evidence connected to the washing machine discovery covered in the previous section. Those charges were recommended by the Del Rio Police Department following the investigation. And that distinction matters because recommended charges and formal indictment are not the same thing under Texas law. What police file and what a grand jury hands down are 2 separate steps in the legal process. As of now, No grand jury has formally indicted any of the three women. That step is still ahead. It is the next significant legal milestone in this case, and it will determine whether these charges move forward into a full criminal prosecution. A question that has come up consistently in comment sections and across social media since this case went public is this. If only Cookie allegedly held a knife, how can Kitty and Foz face the same murder charge? It is a fair and legally precise question. The answer lies in a statute called the law of parties. Under Texas law, when two or more people act together with shared criminal purpose, each participant can be held legally responsible for the actions of the others during the commission of that crime. The person who carries out the fatal act is not the only one exposed to the most serious charge. If you were there, if you participated, if your actions were part of a coordinated effort, the law treats your culpability as equal to that of the person who delivered the decisive blow. Applied to this case, that means Kitty Mia Diaz and Kayanda Renee Foz do not need to have held a weapon to face a murder charge. The affidavit documents that both women physically participated in the assault on Caroline Peña. That participation, under the law of parties, places them within the same legal framework as Cookie regardless of what each individual did in those specific moments. Defense attorneys will almost certainly challenge the application of that statute when this case reaches a courtroom. That is standard legal strategy, and it is worth noting. But the law of parties is well established in Texas courts and has been used successfully in comparable cases involving multiple defendants. The Del Rio Police Department has also stated publicly that the investigation remains active and that additional charges against any of the three suspects are possible as detectives continue reviewing evidence. What form those charges might take has not been specified. The legal process from here runs through a grand jury. When that grand jury convenes, and what they decide will shape everything that follows. Every case has threads that the public documents do not close. This one has several, and they matter because any one of them could shift the direction of this case when it reaches a courtroom. Start with the one question that sits at the center of everything. Why did this happen? Del Rio Police Chief Frank Ramirez has said publicly that the attack was not random and that all four women knew each other. Caroline had a reason to be at that address, but knowing that a motive exists and knowing what it is are two completely different things. As of the time this video was recorded, no official motive has been released by law enforcement. The history between these four women, whatever dispute or relationship brought them to East 10th Street on that Thursday afternoon, has not been made public. That information is almost certainly part of the active investigation and will likely surface when this case moves toward formal prosecution. Until then, it remains the largest unanswered question in this entire story. The second thread is the murder weapon. The probable cause affidavit states that Cookie was seen holding an object believed to be a knife as she approached Caroline. That object has never been publicly confirmed as recovered. Police have not announced a weapon seizure. Whether it was found at the scene, recovered from the second residence, or has not yet been located is unknown. In any murder prosecution, the physical weapon carries significant evidentiary weight. Its status in this investigation is a detail worth watching closely. Third is the full nature of the relationship between the four women. Del Rio is a city of 35,000 people. These women all lived there. They knew each other. But the specific connection, the shared history, whether this was a long-standing conflict or something more recent, has not been disclosed. And then there are the charges themselves. The Del Rio Police Department has confirmed openly that additional charges remain possible. What those might be and who they might target has not been specified. This case is not finished. Not legally. Not investigatively. The grand jury has not yet spoken. When it does, unsolved files will be here. When the motive finally surfaces, when new charges are filed, when this moves into a courtroom, this channel covers it first and covers it fully. If you are not subscribed yet, do it now. You will want to be here for what comes next. Before this video ends, it is worth stepping back from the affidavits, the surveillance footage, the legal statutes, and the unanswered questions, and return to the person at the center of all of it. Caroline Peña was 32 years old. She was a twin. Somewhere in Del Rio right now. Her sister is living in a world that looks exactly the same from the outside and is completely different from the inside. That is what loss like this does to the people left closest to it. It does not announce itself every day. It just stays. Caroline left behind 5 children. The oldest was 17 at the time of her death, close enough to adulthood to understand everything that happened, and young enough that the weight of it will follow him for a long time. The younger ones will grow up with a different kind of understanding, shaped by what they are told, by photographs, by the stories of people who love their mother choose to keep alive. Her childhood friend Zelina Ochoa spoke to KNS5 in the days after Caroline's death. She was not describing a headline when she talked about Caro. She was describing a person, someone she had known across years, across distance, across the ordinary gaps that life puts between people who care about each other. She said Caro was born to be a mom, that she truly loved it. Christina Salinas, who drove to that hospital the moment she saw the photo circulating online, who sat with Caro before she was airlifted, who made it there in time to say goodbye, told the same outlet something that has stayed with everyone who heard it. She said that even then, in that hospital, in that condition, Caro was still standing her ground. That is who she was. Not the worst afternoon of her life. Not the image that spread across the internet. The woman her friends described. The mother her children knew. This case is still open. A grand jury has not yet spoken. Justice has not yet been formally delivered. When it is, Unsolved Files will cover it. Subscribe so you are here when that happens. Everything in this video is drawn from police department documents, the probable cause affidavit, and verified reporting from NBC News, Fox News, KNS5, Court TV, Oxygen, and the New York Post. Kitty Mia Diaz, Amaya Cookie Diaz, and Kayanda Renee Foz have been charged but not indicted or convicted, and are legally presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law.